All right. Well, I think I will open up the webinar. Kia ora koutou. Ko Jackson tōku ingoa. My name is Jackson Rowland, and I am the director of the Aotearoa New Zealand Stewardship Code. Thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar today, and for those of you watching the recording afterwards. This webinar is specifically focused on introducing the Aotearoa New Zealand Stewardship Code to investor service providers. This introduction follows the code recently expanding our application to investor service providers, which really was a natural progression for the code after it has seen really strong adoption by managers of majority of New Zealand's assets under management already. Service providers are a really key part of New Zealand's investment ecosystem, particularly in a market like ours. When we talk about service providers, we mean organisations that assist asset managers and owners in their work, including financial advisors, investment consultants, proxy advisors, and data and research providers. By welcoming these organisations as signatories, we hope to further spread the adoption of stewardship across Aotearoa. We hope to increase the quality of stewardship and also increase our alignment between the New Zealand Stewardship Code and the 20 plus other stewardship codes that already exist around the world, many of those that already include service providers. So for today's webinar, I'm really pleased to be joined by one of our existing founding signatories, Harbour Asset Management, and two of our first service provider signatories, Ethical Investing New Zealand and Glass Lewis. Each of these guests are going to provide short presentations about their stewardship activity, with a particular focus on the role of service providers within all of this. We'll then have some time for Q&A at the end of this. So for those of you that are watching this live, I invite you to post any questions you have into the chat throughout the presentations. And with that context, let's now get into it. So first, I'd like to welcome Sue Walker, Senior Manager of Responsible Investing at Harbour Asset Management. Harbour are one of the founding signatories to the Stewardship Code, and I'm particularly pleased that we have Sue speaking with us today, as Sue was also part of the development committee that actually created the code back across 2021 and 2022. So with that, I'll now pass over to Sue for an introduction to the code and how it applies to service providers.
Thanks, Jackson. Kia ora tātou. Welcome, everyone. I might actually just jump straight into the next slide, so we'll just get straight into it if that's okay. So just to cover off a little bit about what investor stewardship is. So stewardship is about creating and preserving long-term value for current and future generations. And the code that we're developing and the codes that we see around the world are fantastic for providing a really good framework for investors to align to and ensure that the approach that they're taking to stewardship is aligning to both international norms and an independent framework, I guess. Okay, and we'll just pop into the next slide where we'll get into some of the detail about the code itself. So I thought I would quickly go through the key principles of the code and what it's all about, what we're working towards. So the first one, well, we've got 9. So the first one is to be committed, and that's about setting up making sure that your investment articulates how articulate your governance structures, your investment approach, articulates how you go about good and strong stewardship. So the next one is establish and maintain policies, which is probably pretty obvious, but having stewardship and responsible investment policies in place that are measurable and effective. Excuse me. The third, incorporate material ESG matters. So that's ensuring that as part of your investment decision process, that you're thinking about environmental, social, and governance matters and including those in your decisions, and also about your ongoing monitoring of the investments within your portfolio. So the fourth one is to be engaged. So this is about engaging both with investee companies and encouraging them to improve their practices, but also I think engaging with other. It can be about engaging with your fund managers if you're using external managers for parts of your investment portfolio. The next one is vote responsibly. again, probably pretty obvious, but ensuring that you're voting in line with your mandates and what your clients expect, and in line with the policies that you've set up. The next, manage conflicts of interest. So this is around ensuring that your approach to voting and any potential conflicts of interest are identified and managed within your stewardship approach. The next one is collaborate and advocate for change. So this is about, and very much a part of the stewardship code and the stewardship ecosystem, is about collaborating and advocating for change. So some good examples of that people might be aware of recently is we're consulting on some of the changes that are happening through MB on climate disclosures. So a lot of investors are inputting or providing their input on what they think those changes or suggested changes should be, which is really important for disclosure in New Zealand. So the next, measure and report, so stewardship code signatories are expected to report each year on their stewardship activities, and also the measurement part to make sure that the progress is being made and that what they're doing and their policies, approach, etc. is effective. So, and the last one is about education and improvement. So this is both internal to stewardship code signatories, so improving our approaches, our understanding of what good stewardship is. Obviously, markets and systems evolve and change, so making sure we're staying up to date with what's going on in the market, but also about educating within the broader ecosystem. And I attended, I think, great example of that, attended a for-purpose governance workshop yesterday, and we're talking about incorporating their values into their investment approach and style. And I was really pleased to see that a lot of them were very aware of the positive impacts of stewardship and engagement, and very much moved on from just using exclusions as their approach. Okay, so I thought the next, sorry, we can stay on that slide. Apologies. I just thought I'd quickly talk about why we joined, and I probably have a bit of an interesting case where when I was part of the development committee, I was actually working for BNZ, and with the transaction last year and the formation of First Cape, I moved with the BNZ Wealth team into Harbour Asset Management, and Harbour obviously was also a signatory. But I mean, for both, the reasons were very much the same. So stewardship, has always been thought, it's very much a core part of what responsible investing is for Harbour, and very, very much reflected. We joined the Principles for Responsible Investing very early on, when Harbour, I think pretty much back since Harbour's inception, and one of these principles was about active ownership. So very much believe in stewardship and active ownership as an approach to ensuring that we get real world changes. And I think, and another reason for us is we really wanted to walk the walk or talk the talk with what we're doing, and demonstrate that we're aligning with a framework that is considered an independent standard for the investment market, and a great opportunity for us to learn and develop and ensure that we're continuing to improve our approach. And lastly, I'll probably just add to that the monthly updates in the forum and the committee, and the ability to talk to other signatories has been really valuable for us as investors. So lastly, just very quickly, I think Jackson mentioned role on the committee, very much part of development of the code. Our input was a lot around formation of the principles and providing input and feedback on what those should look like, as well as drafting elements of the code. It was a great process, actually. Very much enjoyed it. So now we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so just quickly, Some stewardship examples, which was part of our stewardship report that we released at Harbour released late last year. And I think the first one is, often we certainly see and believe at Harbour that, companies that have strong and good governance, often, will also deal very well with the environmental and social aspects of ESG. So we do focus on that. So the first one was about engaging with senior management and directors about the independence and diversity on the board. I'm very pleased to see that while it took a while, that they have actually worked on that and appointed committed to appointing, two independent directors. And they'd announced this sort of earlier this year that they'd appointed 2 female non-executive directors, so which is great, with great skills and experience. And then the second one, we have also been focusing a lot on disclosure and ensuring, and especially with the climate disclosures coming on, looking at those and other reporting and suggesting areas for improvement, which is always well received, or usually well received by companies. So and again, there's been progress following the engagement, and we continue to monitor those their progress, and will continue to monitor their progress. So we can move on to the next slide. It's just a couple of examples, or some examples of voting. Okay, so this again from our stewardship report, just showing what the breakdown of the votes, where we haven't voted in line with management, and most of the time that is relating to election of directors or remuneration, executive remuneration. So, and an example of this was where we voted against management recommendations to approve bonuses paid to executives at an Australian consumer services company due to them being excessive relative to other companies, and no transparency over the performance measures that that they were getting paid those bonuses over. Okay, move on to the next slide. Now, I thought I had some great animation set up, but I haven't, so apologies for that. It worked on my slides when I set them off. Anyway, so if we can just imagine that the investor service providers circle and the box out to the side is not there to start with. It's just is a great slide, and was part of the development of the code around the ecosystem for asset owners and asset managers, and there's obviously lots of opportunities within that to engage and collaborate to ensure that we get good outcomes from both our investee companies, but also on policy and regulation that may be impacting this. So I think one of the key things around stewardship is the fiduciary duties. It can really help support with fiduciary duties, and it is something that regulators have been looking at. And certainly, if investors are saying that they're engaging with companies or their asset managers, they're expecting to see strong evidence of this. So I think the reporting from the code, the alignment to the code is very much supportive of that. So and now, if we had the animation, income service providers, so the likes of financial advisors, investment consultants, proxy advisors, data and research, which are very much part of this ecosystem, and we work very closely with them. So it's great to see them join the code and be a part of that system. So just we pop on to the next slide. So Harbour uses 2 key service providers that perform quite a few functions for us. Apologise for the typo in the first bullet point, but proxy advisors to support us with our voting, which and the information that they provide on companies and votes is fantastic. We use third-party data providers for data and research. We also use third parties for our screening services. So where we do apply exclusions, we get information from that. And we're also looking at controversy monitoring and modern slavery scorecards. So all that external and independent information is valuable in us, fulfilling our stewardship responsibilities. So and very much a part of for service providers being a part of the stewardship ecosystem. It's great that they'll be helping us with, I guess, providing all the key things that we need around engagement, but for them to understand what we're trying to achieve will be a very core part of that. So I think that's me. Apologies, I've gone a little bit over time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, for that great overview, and even talking to the change that New Zealand has seen across stewardship from the original negative screening focus through now to a more maturation towards more engagement in addition to that negative screen, and even talking about the connection to fiduciary duties that stewardship has. I think that's a really great overview, and hopefully you can see now the really important and clear role that service providers play amongst all of this. So with that, I'm now going to introduce one of the service providers who have been one of the first to sign up to the code. So I'm pleased to welcome Dal Jandu, a financial planner at Ethical Investing New Zealand. Ethical Investing New Zealand had already aligned with the stewardship code prior to becoming a signatory because they really see stewardship as a key tool to support their clients. And naturally, therefore, when they were able to become a signatory, they were one of the first to do so. So please welcome Dal to share a bit more about why Ethical Investing New Zealand are a signatory. Thanks, Dal. Oh, and I'll just bring you off mute. There we go, try now.
Thanks, Jackson. Hello, everybody. So we're Ethical Investing New Zealand is an employee-owned financial planning firm specialising in ethical investing. And when it comes to stewardship, if we just forward through to the next slide, it's quite simplistically, we look at it in two aspects. The first is helping clients with their goals and objectives. And then the second is having a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of clients. So helping clients with their goals and objectives, that's nothing new. For many of our clients, they'll have one eye on the present and one eye on the future. And the future will often involve helping others either during their client's lifetime or after. So really what we'll do is we'll support clients with acting as guardians of their wealth. The second aspect, again, similar to other financial planners, we have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of clients. The slight difference being that most of our clients come to us for our advice and expertise around ethical investing. So we need to make sure that our portfolios and the managers that we use take stewardship seriously, especially when it comes to sustainable outcomes for our environment, society and economy. We roll through to the next slide. Great. And we've definitely observed some trends locally. The first aspect with helping clients with goals and objectives, that hasn't changed dramatically over time. For many, there's still a balancing act of using the funds now versus in the future. One thing that has changed or developed is that whilst clients still want to support loved ones, often children and grandchildren, we're seeing more clients looking to hand over funds with a warm hand rather than a cold hand. And that's not just for things like a house deposit, but more for things like making family memories. So it could be taking an extended holiday or an experience. So gone the ski club where they're looking to spend the kids' inheritance, but actually spend it with them. Our trustees are also becoming more educated about fiduciary duties and obligations to all beneficiaries, not just mum and dad who may have set the trust up. So an example around that is really our trustees thinking about climate change when they're putting plans in place for all beneficiaries. The second aspect has definitely changed. Clients are becoming more aware and educated when it comes to ethical investing. We have a range of different clients with different shades of green. So some will be on the lighter shade of green, some will be on the dark shade of green. And that means that we have to be mindful of things like greenwashing and to make sure fund managers do what they say they're going to do. So one of the things that we look at when we're looking to work with a fund manager is, how long have they been incorporating ESG into their investment framework, for example? And it's not just a token fund for the marketing team to kind of push out their brand in the market. If we go through to the next slide, thanks. So we joined the New Zealand Code. Like as Jackson said, we've kind of looked at it and aligned to it for a long time now, and the similarities made it a little bit easier for us as a firm. Ultimately, we're here to create and preserve long-term value for current and future generations, to ensure the efficient management of capital whilst considering the best interest of clients and beneficiaries, and importantly, to contribute towards achieving sustainable outcomes for our environment, society, and economy. So this framework has been really helpful for us to articulate our approach to sustainability, and importantly, it holds us to account because of the reporting requirements. But there's some benefits to it as well. So we're able to upskill ourselves and our education around sustainability. So we use Marpur Wealth as our research provider. So this really gives us more knowledge and understanding to be able to challenge their thinking and not just take their recommendations as gospel. As a team, our advisors are either working towards or at RIA certification, and as a firm, we're RIA certified. We're members of the RIA Aotearoa Collaboration Working Group, and Mark Holton, one of our directors and financial planners, is currently working through his AIF designation. So it really points towards the same purpose, and showing that we are, by joining the Aotearoa New Zealand Stewardship Code, serious when it comes to sustainability, and it's not just for a trend that's in it at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dale. I think, the leadership position that Ethical Investing New Zealand has taken across the ethical space for a number of years now is very clear. And this is just another example. Your early adoption and leadership with the New Zealand Stewardship Code is really great to see, and the alignment with the longer term goals and aspirations that your organization and your clients are working towards. So thank you very much for joining today. Now, for the final presentation from our next service provider, I thought it was worth noting that about a quarter of the signatories to the New Zealand Stewardship Code are actually internationally headquartered organisations, and this applies with service providers too. And today we're joined by Glass Lewis, an international proxy advisor and a signatory to multiple codes around the world already, including now the New Zealand Stewardship Code. Today we're pleased to have Philip Fu, the VP of APAC Research and Engagement, to share a bit more about why Glass Lewis have signed up and what they've learned from other codes. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Jackson. Well, in trying to engage with the question, what's Glass Lewis's approach to stewardship, I need to change the question a little bit and introduce what Glass Lewis does, because I'm aware we're probably not quite yet at household names status. So Glass Lewis, what we do is we aim to support investors' stewardship activities. So the question is less about what's our approach to stewardship and more, how do we go about supporting others in their stewardship journey? What we've found over time is that stewardship has evolved from being, let's say 10 years ago, a sub-function of the investment team, where you'd likely have a portfolio manager or investment analyst conducting the stewardship activities, to something that's really broken out into its own sub-function, with global asset managers having the head of responsible investment or head of stewardship or similar title reporting directly to the head of equities. So stewardship has come through quite a significant journey over time and is really hitting new levels of maturity versus a decade or so ago. But within that, you'll find that institutional investors are obviously of significantly different size and maturity. And some investors will have very limited stewardship resources, or potentially just a single person. Some will continue to have teams dedicated to the stewardship space, and it may be dozens globally, and others, particularly small fund managers, where there really are only a handful of people, the stewardship function is still undertaken by someone in the investment in an investment function. So our goal at Glass Lewis is to, no matter what, where an investor sits on that spectrum, we want to enable investors to undertake stewardship easier and make their limited resources go further. So we do that in a couple of ways. We provide voting recommendations and analysis, so recommendations to shareholders on how to vote at AGMs and EGMs, so their shareholder companies. We provide implementation of thematic and custom policy methods to vote. So, for instance, if a investor wishes to oppose chairs of boards where there are no women on the board, that is something that we can enable for our clients, and that's something that would be able to flow through automatically into a proxy voting platform, so that a single individual would be able to apply a policy across a portfolio of hundreds or thousands. We also have services where Glass Lewis can engage on behalf of our clients, and as well as we provide services to allow tracking of engagements and reporting of engagement activities. So that's the spectrum of where Glass Lewis is engaged in stewardship activities. It's from voting, it's to engagement, and then also it's on the, I guess, more boring side, on the reporting and the compliance function. So why have we joined the Aotearoa and New Zealand Stewardship Code? Well, we, as a stewardship service provider, want to show our support for the development of investor stewardship globally and in New Zealand. And we also want to align ourselves with the most thoughtful stewards of capital in the space, and that, to us, is really something that's promoted by these stewardship codes. Can we turn to the next slide, please? So as Jackson mentioned, we're a member of a few stewardship codes globally, as well as complying with similar codes and regulations that are specific to proxy advisors. And there are some differences between the codes, which I'll get to in a moment. But the good news for global players, if any are listening to this webinar, is that there's a lot of shared requirements between the codes, whereby if you're complying with the UK Stewardship Code, you are, well, which I should add is the most mature and oldest code in existence today, you are complying, well, you've got practices that are going to be compliant with 95% of other codes, including the New Zealand Stewardship Code. Now, each code does have local flavors, with the New Zealand Code leaning towards leaning on concept of guardianship and conservation more heavily than some of the others. But nonetheless, the high-level themes around what your duties are, how that engagement is part of the journey, and that you need to report on your activities and outcomes are really fundamental across most of these codes. It's fantastic to see New Zealand come join the group with a stewardship code. I am one of thousands of New Zealanders who are living in Sydney. So I grew up in New Zealand, and my observation is, look, we all grew up with those concepts of guardianship and conservation. So in a sense, New Zealand lends itself very easily to concepts of investment stewardship. It may not quite have the size of the financial markets and the size of the investment stewardship teams that we see in London, but nonetheless, I think this is an excellent development, and one that will be a really good cultural fit with New Zealand as a country. Now, to give, we just remain on that prior slide, please. To give a bit of a sense on what are the differences between some of the codes, I have a table on the screen here comparing the UK Stewardship Code against New Zealand. And the UK Stewardship Code I mentioned before, is the oldest in existence, and as a result is the most mature. It has the highest level of requirements. The New Zealand Stewardship Code is relatively recent, and I should add the majority of the global 20 plus or 20 odd stewardship codes are far more akin to the New Zealand Stewardship Code. So in a sense, this is about comparing, I guess, newer stewardship codes against where the UK has managed to get to in the past 15 years. So a key difference, firstly, the UK Stewardship Code has now had multiple versions, whereas the New Zealand Stewardship Code is in its first edition. The UK Stewardship Code is regulator-led. It's run by the Financial Reporting Council, which is a government entity, whereas the New Zealand Stewardship Code and many other global stewardship codes are industry-led. The UK Stewardship Code for service providers has actually broken out 6 separate principles under which the service providers must adhere to, whereas New Zealand and many others, the service providers have the same 9 principles as the asset managers and asset owners, though the requirement to adhere to those principles are just which are applicable. And finally, the New Zealand Code is, in now the way we're interpreting the code, is that it's really aimed at encouraging adoption of best practices of stewardship and encouraging the growth in stewardship interest and stewardship activities. That again is the case for most codes. The UK previously was similar in that regard, but since the latest edition in 2020 has actually switched gears somewhat and has more of a focus on accreditation. So the UK code has, I think, around 120 or so signatories, of which about a third now have their reporting rejected as signatories on their first attempt, making it a bit of a licensing regime in some sense. Some of those third that were pushed back on were actually household name asset managers, and upon revision, they've successfully been able to regain their signatory status. But there was a bit of an embarrassment there when this change occurred. Finally, the UK Stewardship Code is actually has consultations out looking to increase the requirements on proxy advisors and investment consultants. So their I guess ambition at becoming a challenging code to join is continuing. Nonetheless, we think it's great for the space. Can we turn to the next slide, please? And look, I should wrap that up. It's just a sense, just to give everyone a sense that most stewardship codes are aimed at drawing people in, but there is a maturity level of the UK code where it's actually changing towards accreditation, and that may be, I'm not sure, Jackson, it's probably a question for Jackson, that may or may not be something that the New Zealand Stewardship Code would consider down the track. Okay, so as a signatory to multiple codes, here's some advice, some lessons learned for prospective service provider signatories. We'll start with some good news. Our observation is that stewardship codes globally have been very effective at supporting the growth of the stewardship industry and the maturity of the stewardship industry, in particular with trying to bridge the gap or encouraging bridging the gap of stewardship activities with actual outcomes. We also note that service providers' signatory reporting is much less onerous than that of asset owners and asset managers. We don't hold any securities, so it's more around governance, reporting, duties. So to any prospective joiners, that's one thing to consider. And as I mentioned before, if you're already a member of some other stewardship codes, particularly the UK, you're likely already more compliant than you realize. The challenge is that reporting against stewardship codes does take time. And while stewardship codes globally do cover similar ground, when it comes to reporting, you'll find that there's different formats that are required and different case studies. You'll have to spend some time instead of using your case study related to the UK, I'd encourage you to be using case studies applicable to the New Zealand market. Fortunately, the New Zealand Code has provided a grace period on reporting for new signatories, so there is some time to overcome those challenges. That's it from me.
Fantastic, Philip. Thank you very much for that quite global coverage. As you can really see now, the adoption of stewardship globally and particularly in New Zealand and the way we're approaching it here. And I think I've really liked one of the opening points you made around the role of service providers within the spaces to make things easier for those asset managers and owners. And certainly that applies to stewardship. And one of the reasons we saw value in extending the code to include service providers so everyone can be on the same page. So thank you, Philip, for that great overview. We're now going to transition into a bit of a brief panel conversation to close this webinar today. So CJ, we can stop sharing the screen for now, and we'll just spotlight the speakers for as we transition into this panel phase. And now I know while we do that, Phil ended the conversation on talking about reporting, and naturally reporting is a particular topic of interest for people in New Zealand, particularly given the various conversations had about climate disclosures and the likes last year in particular. So Phil, I might start this panel section with a question to you, because I do think that idea of having to produce a report is alarming for many. But we noted that Glass Lewis is already producing stewardship reports for various codes around the world. So I just wanted to ask, I guess, what's the value for Glass Lewis in developing a report?
So look, the complying against the stewardship code, which includes report, has led to changes in Glass Lewis. A lot of the change probably already occurred with compliance with the best practice principles, which is something applicable to the proxy advisor industry. But it has led to us realizing over time that we didn't have a place for non-client stakeholders to raise complaints. So it has led to some serious change regarding our opening up of a complaint centre. And that's something that you become aware of as you go through reporting against a code which contains best practices, and you realise some of your answers are stronger than others, right? So we have certainly benefited from engaging in the codes and engaging in that reporting. In terms of how do we benefit from the report, look, we display our statements proudly on our website. We want to align ourselves with the most thoughtful stewards in the market. So there's always that element of that you're able to signal to your clients that you do take care in these things, and in particular, you do take a care on the local elements of the different codes.
Yeah, great. So that transparency, it sounds like, is a really important part of this, and transparently communicating and disclosing the practices that you have and why they're strong practices and why your stakeholders may be interested in that. So that's really helpful to hear. Dale, I might come to you for the next question, and sticking to this reporting theme. Why did the idea of having to produce a report not put off Ethical Investing New Zealand, for example? Why? What are you thinking as you're thinking about the idea of having to prepare a report?
Yeah, we actually saw it as an opportunity, really, to bring more clarity around what we do and how we do it. When we looked at the code, we already had the bones of it, so it was just a case of fleshing it out and pulling it all together. And the fact that we have time to put the report together really helps. Because we are a small team, we don't have the resources to be able to outsource it, and we have to obviously look at other commitments through our day-to-day role. So that time element was a factor. The other big factor around the code was it being a comply or explain. So there's parts of the code that we might not be able to comply with today, but that will either be aspirational or it's a part of the business that doesn't relate directly to us. An example, if we look at Principle 5 and the voting and vote responsibly. So we use managed funds rather than investing into shares directly. So we don't have voting rights, but we meet with portfolio managers on a regular basis. So we can challenge them and ask them how they're using their voting rights. And importantly, what are the tangible outcomes on the back of those? So there's still parts of it that we can, like I say, just explain rather than exclude altogether. And what's actually been really helpful is how welcoming other signatories have been. So we've been able to engage with other signatories and talk to them about their process when it comes to voting, which has helped upskill us and means that we can now put something in place, a bit more of a framework around escalation. So we're really holding management teams to account.
Yeah, great. That's really good to hear, Dale. And I think certainly the connection that signatories to the code have collectively, the regular catch-ups that those signatories have, continues to be a really key value point for signatories. And certainly I want to emphasise the point you made around the applicability or the relevance of certain of principles to the code across service providers. And Philip also mentioned this in his slides that not all provisions of the code or not all principles of the code will be relevant to all service providers. And where they're not relevant, there's not an expectation to report against that. So that is something we make clear to make that reporting easier for service providers. So I might come to you for the last question, and I guess Harbour is a leading asset manager in New Zealand. So why is it important for you as an asset manager to have service providers become signatories to the code?
Yeah, and I think that some of this has been touched on before, but and Phil sort of talked about the role of supporting asset owners or asset managers. So I just think that having service providers as part of the code and understanding what asset owners and managers are trying to achieve is a fantastic fantastic step forward. So the richness of the information that's provided to support us in our voting decisions, or the research and data that we use to assess companies when we're making investment decisions, and then obviously with the ongoing information that is provided, so we can help us pinpoint where engagement priorities should be. So all of those things are fantastic, and I think understanding where we're heading will ensure that data and information and support continues. And I think on the financial advisory side, and did touch on this a little bit before, but stewardship is really very forward looking, and that and it takes often the outcomes or the progress takes time. So having financial advisors being able to articulate that to their clients and sort of talking to them about what fund managers are doing and trying to achieve, and why that's a positive thing. I just think certainly help, as I mentioned, with that ecosystem, understanding the importance of stewardship.
Yeah, great. That's a really strong point for me, Sue, is that everyone can speak the same language, if you like. The service providers are talking in the same way that the asset managers and owners are increasingly speaking in New Zealand now, as we've seen this change towards stewardship in recent years. Great. Well, thank you very much to the panelists. Catherine, if you just want to bring up that final slide, I'm just going to really quickly summarise to end this webinar. Really quickly summarise the key value that signatories get by being a signatory to the code as we close today. So as you can see on the screen now, by becoming a signatory, we really talk about four key aspects of or value adds for those signatories. Firstly, and really importantly, is around capability. So the code helps signatories to lift their stewardship capability in a variety of ways, from stewardship masterclasses through to providing private feedback on stewardship reports, particularly focusing on how those reports can be improved in the future. So that's something we hear from signatories regularly. That is really a really valuable piece of feedback, and really uncommon to get across the disclosure space. Connection is also really important, and we've heard that through the signatory forums, which happen monthly, and other events where we bring industry stakeholders together to connect and stay across the key activity, and that's a really key way that initiatives and collaborations come from that, such as the number of collaborative engagements that the investment industry is currently working on have come about quite organically through the increased connection that signatories have. Influence is also really important. Stewardship is still emerging across New Zealand. The code was and it continues to be industry led, and so signatories to the code have a really key role in informing and influencing that continued growth and development, and what the future of stewardship in New Zealand looks like. And finally, leadership. Signatory status is a really clear demonstration of the intent of each of the signatories to be a leader in stewardship. And alongside that, it helps to meet both client and regulator expectations, and bring associated reputation and brand benefits with that. So there's a number of reasons that signatories are joining the code, and we really encourage service providers to think about this too now. If you are interested, the process to become a signatory is very straightforward. Simply need to contact me, and my email is on the screen there, or visit the website, and then we can talk about this further. There's a short legal agreement to sign, a small fee to pay to support this activity, and that varies depending on the size of your organisation. And then you're able to join these signatory forums and make the most of these activities. So please, if any of you watching this are interested in becoming a signatory, or even if you just have a question, please feel free to contact me anytime to discuss. And with that, we'll close this webinar. So thank you very much to everyone who has joined live, and to those who are watching this recording. And a particular thank you to Sue, Dale, and Philip for your insights and leadership, both in this past hour, but also more broadly with the work that you're doing in this space, and the development that you're contributing to with stewardship. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Ka kite.